Welcome to the Addiction Solution Podcast. I'm Michelle Dunbar. Enjoy listening and watching as addiction experts Mark Sheeran and I cover controversial as well as helpful topics on addiction, how to move past it, and other related subjects. As two of the co-founders of the Freedom Model, Mark and I will give you a completely new perspective on the topics that matter to you. We will take to task the Recovery Society's lies and misinformation and replace them with facts, research, and the methods to move on from addiction struggles without 12-step meetings, rehabs, and the shackles of endless recovery. Let's escape the treatment and recovery trap together and learn. Hey everyone, welcome to the Addiction Solution. I'm Michelle Dunbar.
And I'm Mark Sheeran, and we co-wrote, along with our colleague Stephen Slate, the Freedom Model for Addictions, Escape the Treatment and Recovery Trap.
You can find that book on Amazon or digital copy at our website, thefreedommodel.org. There's also an audiobook available as well. And we want to say a couple things about coaching. Mark and I both are professional coaches, and we coach using the Freedom Model. You can only get Freedom Model coaching through the Freedom Model. So we've been told there are other people that might be offering this kind of service.
They sort of took the book and
decided they're going to teach the book, which it is what it is. But
it's good. We want it to spread, but
we do.
But when it comes to the actual model of coaching, what we do, we're it. Or the certified coaches that work with us, Danny, Steve,
yes,
and others.
And here's a big difference, because this book is tremendous. It's wonderful. And there are a whole lot of people that have used this book to solve their problem. But there are also a lot of people who need additional help beyond this book. And what we have is called the binge construct is not in this book. It is only available through coaching and through our solution to addiction workshops and coaching packages. And when you do coaching with us, it's completely non-judgmental, and we help you to figure out your why completely without us directing you per se, because if you're not going to figure this out on your own,
that's right,
you're not going to change.
That's exactly right. So the book, it's interesting because the more we coach, we've been coaching for 36 years, and the more we coach in conjunction with the book and the workshops and the various things that we have. So people might get a workshop and get 7/8 of the way there. But then there's probably going to be some things where you're trying to figure out why you do what you do. And that piece requires, in some cases, not all,
right,
a conversation.
Yep.
A conversation with somebody that understands how to mine for that data and help you discover your why. And so that's where you may have been introduced to the Freedom Model. You might have read the book. You might be 7/8 of the way there, and now you're saying, I just need a session or two. Yeah. So if you're that person, give us a call, the number, or go to the links below.
Yes. So you can call us at 1-888-424-2626 or go to thefreedommodel.org and learn about our various coaching packages. All right. So what we're going to talk about today, we've gotten some questions through our group, and I've seen also through other leaving AA type groups about, can you be following the Freedom Model, learning the Freedom Model, and just go to 12-step meetings for the fellowship?
Yeah. So we've done other podcasts around this, but this one's going to be a little more pointed about that very topic. So we talk a lot of times about sort of being in purgatory.
Yeah.
And that is that you have 1 foot in AA, 1 foot out. But this podcast is going to be a little more specific about not just leaving AA, but being actively involved in reading the Freedom Model or going to our workshops and still having AA as this sort of side gig. And whether the two can coexist.
Specifically, I think for because people are so afraid of being alone, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
you're one of the number one questions I get from people when they call and they're like, boy, this stuff you do makes so much sense. But is there a group? Are there people that are like-minded that I can, talk with or spend time with? And I know that some people have connected with other freedom model people through our groups and stuff. And while I do understand that because it is nice to talk with like-minded people, there is a difference between doing that and using it, believing that you need support. And that's the primary issue with the 12-step group, right? Is this idea that you are weak and without support, you're doomed.
So that's such a good point. So we're going to talk about the nuance between support and just cohabitating with people and friendships. But I'm gonna go in a different direction for a little while, and I want to talk about my experience a little bit about leaving AA, and what a strange process it was for me. Now I'm going to jump way ahead to where I am now, and I can tell you that now you couldn't pay me to ever go to AA. You literally couldn't pay me. There's no way I would do it. And here's why. For me, what it came down to was the quality of relationships that I've built in my life. When I was in AA, my self-esteem was so low and I was struggling so horribly with my life and I was so unbelievably lost that the sort of surface level love bombing that happened, just this idea that I could fit in with a bunch of other losers like myself, was enough glue for me to stick it out for a decade of my life. That's how fucked up I was. And I just didn't know that I could have relationships that weren't attached to how screwed up I was or am.
Wow, that's a great point.
And so the relationship glue, the thing that bonded me in this cult was a side of me that was freaking ugly. It wasn't a good place. It wasn't a good place for my life. It wasn't a good era in my life. And I was completely consumed with the idea that this is just who I was. And this is what made me unique and spiritual. I mean, talk about twisting something that is horrible into a positive, but never really is a positive. It was never good for me to sit in the meetings and talk about the crap I did years prior. I mean, how is that at all beneficial to me or anybody? So then I'll say that to people. I'll say, I don't know what you're looking for in AA. I know you want fellowship.
Right.
But what the hell is the fellowship based on? And they say, well, no, I'm in a special AA group, we go golfing and stuff. And I said, well, tell them that you're totally involved in the freedom model. You don't think you need meetings. You're not going to go to meetings anymore, but you still want the friendship, and see how it goes. Then you'll see if it's a contractual friendship or not. Let me tell you something. Every single relationship I ever had in AA was conditional and contractual. And that was, I either followed the big book and not this one. It just wasn't allowed. And now there was no freedom model in those days. There was just me thinking differently, and I wasn't allowed to think differently. So,
yeah, I mean, I like Mark, you couldn't pay me to go to meetings, and every friendship that I had, and I had what I would consider some pretty solid, very close friendships with a few women in AA. But every one of those friendships was completely conditional, not just to me going to meetings. I want to make this clear. One of the reasons that I left was because if I didn't go to meetings every day and make AA the center of my world, then I was horribly judged, shunned. I could hear people talking about me. That wasn't my paranoia. I knew it was happening. It would get back to me what people were saying about me. It felt like high school all over again. And I was, kind of an odd duck in high school. So feeling like I belonged was a did bring me in. That the love bombing, all of that brought me in and made me think, "Oh, maybe these are my people. Maybe this is my place." Right? Until I started questioning things, which happened pretty early on, but I would only question things very quietly to just the couple people like Mark who were kind of questioning things too. But then I did things I wasn't supposed to do. And the minute I started doing those things, I mean, it was like night and day. Um, I was not treated nice anymore.
Yeah.
And only by people that wanted something from me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. Now I know that there's going to be those of you out there who say that's not been my experience. And I do think there are different gradations of AA and NA, or other 12-step groups. There's obviously a spectrum of
Yeah.
sickness in them. Not sickness literally, but
But dysfunction.
yeah, just chaos. You just really unhealthy stuff going on. I happen to find myself in the epicenter of where AA started with the zealotry and the fundamentalists. I was a big book thumper. I got caught up in this sort of weird world where one faction was against another faction.
Yeah,
And
what's weird.
This shit has been going on in AA. You can read about it in the history of AA since the beginning. I mean, people died in the early years where people were shot over issues, literally with guns, shot in their homes, and really bizarre things had happened because they disagreed with each other. And so when you know the history of AA and then you live through it, if you're really a part of AA, you will see things, or NA, or any 12-step group for that matter. Doesn't really matter. It's all weird. Because here's why. Fundamentally, the whole point of it is that you can't think for yourself.
Exactly, which is not true.
Yeah, so if you are powerless, your mind, you are powerless, then you're always going to be at the mercy of the crowd, of groupthink. And if you don't do that and you start thinking for yourself, you're not going to fit. And the whole point of the freedom model is how to think for yourself.
Yeah.
Is you're free to think whatever the hell you want to think. And so this book, this 470 pages, is to undo the damage of this ethos that you're this powerless, hapless, incapable of change creature. It eliminates that idea. Well, so being an AA, just you're not going to fit well. It's going to be a difficult process.
Well, and here, and I have said to people before, they've been like, what do you think about me going just going to that meeting once a week just so I can, keep my connections there. And look, we're not trying to convince you to do one way or the other. We're not trying to convince you of anything. It really, we don't have any skin in that game. Okay. So you can choose to do what you want. What we're telling you is it is contrary, such a polar opposite of the freedom model. And so what you're doing is you're going to a group under kind of a false premise, which is not fair to the group members, quite frankly. So you're going to this group that has a specific purpose, one singular purpose. AA's singular purpose is to keep members that agree with them.
And expand.
That's it.
And recruit
and make money. Okay. Because $1 or whatever it is these days in the basket by 2 million people around the world, you do the math. Okay. Every single day. So that's what they're trying to do there. So in my mind, if you're just looking for friendship, if you're just looking for some kind of friendship or fellowship, there are literally infinite groups of people that are doing things that are productive, volunteering in different areas, soup kitchens, volunteering with children and all the various different things, volunteering at a hospital. There are so many things you could do based on things that you like to do.
Be careful on the table.
That are incredibly productive.
Yeah.
Right? So when I left AA, I'll tell you a little bit about when I left AA. I was a new mom, and one of the reasons I was shunned was because I was choosing my children over the meetings. I was choosing to be a mommy and be home with my children in the evenings rather than go to a meeting. And that tells you something right there, that I was shunned for that choice, right? I ended up volunteering with a youth organization. I helped my husband when he was coaching Little League. I did things that I could do with my children, and met a lot of wonderful people. Now, people are people everywhere. And here's the difference, because you might be like, well, you meet crappy people everywhere. Sure you do. But the difference is when you're at a 12-step meeting, there's this very singular purpose there, and you're with a whole lot of people that are very troubled in general.
Mhm.
And they're there because they're troubled specifically. When you're at another organization, you may have some troubled people there, but that's not why they're there. They're there because they believe in whatever thing you're working towards. They're trying to be productive in their lives. And that is a completely different motivation than why people go to AA meetings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. So one of the gray areas is an example you used, like the soup kitchens. A lot of times that's one of the common things that AA will say to go,
you should do this.
Yeah,
right?
you should go volunteer here, and you should go volunteer and do service work there. Now, why do they pick it's almost universal that they'll pick those things in inner cities to volunteer for, because that's where drunks are, and that's how they recruit.
That is how they recruit. When I say to go do something like that's more productive, I'm just saying there are a lot of other things you could do.
I wanted to make a distinction there because I knew your intention, but the intention of AA is, I know there are people out there that have been practiced in AA, and they'll say, yeah, I did that whole thing, and they manipulated. So you have to be incredibly careful when you're around AA, because they are very pointed in their volunteer activities, because it's all geared towards finding the people who are struggling alcoholics, and one alcoholic working with another alcoholic. And the only thing that does is keep you in the narrative. It keeps you there. It keeps you in your past. It keeps you tied to this bullshit narrative that you're this broken person. So when Michelle's talking about moving forward, we're talking about anything that is not that narrative, which stretches your courage and says, okay, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I'm going to go live my life this way, and I'm going to go build friendships in areas I've never done before.
Or in areas that things I used to like to do that I stopped doing because I was in AA and it was taking up all of my time, right? So I don't want to confuse people. I'm not saying to go volunteer somewhere as a means to try and keep yourself sober. That's not what I'm saying.
That's
okay.
Right.
What I'm saying is, if your only goal, if you're being honest, your only goal going to AA, continuing to go into meetings is friendship. There are literally infinite ways to meet people and make friends that have similar interests as you do. And without having, if you're really doing the freedom model, you don't need to do anything to not use heavily or to stop your habit.
Listen to what she just said. You may have to rewind that a couple times if you're new to the freedom model. There's nothing to do to maintain quote unquote recovery. None of that exists in the freedom model. So there's just changing your mind with research and information and reality.
Yeah.
It's about making choices, different choices. So that part takes care of the drinking. Now we're talking about friendships.
Yes. Yes.
And the two don't have to have any connection whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I tell people, listen, you want to go back to AA, go. It's going to be fucking miserable. That it's going to eventually be miserable, because the more you realize you don't need it, the more you realize this is weird land.
Right. Because if you really understand the freedom model, going to a meeting it can be, for me anyways, like once I left AA, I think I had to go back for something. I don't remember, but it was so uncomfortable.
I remember why we used to take employees there that were on
Oh, that's right. That's why.
on our consult calls. And back in the day when we were a huge company,
That's
and
right.
I said, you have to know what AA is like. So you're going to meetings with us, and we would go, and they'd be like, "What is that?" That was so weird.
It was so
And
uncomfortable.
yeah. So
Because everybody, the way everybody talks, once you look at it's unplugging. So you read the freedom model, you watch the videos, you do all this stuff. So you unplug from this matrix, right? And then you go back to a meeting. And if the stuff that people are saying doesn't sound absolutely absurd to you, then you didn't unplug from the matrix well enough.
That is so true. It has its own language, its own symbols. It has the slogans. Like what? I mean, that's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so weird that you would repeat slogans as a way of behaving so you don't pick up, pick up your next drink. So I obviously we're bashing the daylights out of this, but I can tell you that there's no reason to live in both those worlds. That will cause you a lot of pain in the end.
Yeah.
And it puts you in a terrible position with the people there because they don't want to hear it.
Well, no,
they have no desire.
That's the other part of it.
They have no desire to be free. They have no desire. You're not going to go carrying this book as the antithesis of AA's big book and say, this is the answer, folks. It's let people figure that out on their own. You don't have to. The freedom model isn't about recruitment. It isn't about any of that. It's about living your life outside of a cult.
Yeah.
And just living. And that may seem so distant to you as you sit there. It was to me. I mean, AA was a profoundly huge part of my life for 2 decades. And I look back and it's painful sometimes for me to look back in all those years that I wasted. But in my case, I leveraged that into becoming a researcher and upending it, But for you out there, just leave and move on. It's okay. And being lonely is okay too. I want to say that being lonely is okay. I was lonely for years after I left AA and after I quit drinking and that, because I just didn't know how to do this life thing very good. Yeah. And what I realized is nothing bad happened by being alone. And I eventually found a lot of great people, Michelle being one of them.
Yeah. I also want to say about go backwards a little bit about, trying to help the people maybe that you were close to that are still part of the cult. When you leave a cult and you're shunned, and you have to understand the people doing the shunning, the friends that don't contact you that you thought were your friends, those people are fearful. They're not, it's not personal to you. Yes, they're talking about you under the guise that they're worried about you and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's inconsequential in your life because you're autonomous and they're allowed to do what they want and believe what they want.
That's right.
The only way you can help any of those people, if that is really your goal, is to just go live your life. And because it'll get back to them that you're doing okay. It really will. And especially in small communities, we live in a small town, and I still sometimes run into people that I knew in AA, and I haven't been in AA in over 20 years. So you don't have to worry about those people, and you can just move on and live your life, and you don't have to be angry. I get being angry. I'm sure people that were angry at me for some of the things I did to them when I was a AA zealot. But you don't have to be angry at any of them because they're doing what they thought they had to do. Remember, they're indoctrinated like you were.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a great freedom when you finally get to the point where you can just let it go, where you can just say, you know what? I think I'm just ready to let that be in my past.
Yeah.
And man, I'll tell you, I want to talk a little bit about leaving And then, like I said, being lonely,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Also, being depressed is okay. Sometimes we interpret life. Remember, depression is an interpretation that a situation is futile. So emotions follow the way our beliefs. So your beliefs form your emotions, not the other way around. You don't have an emotional reaction and then that creates your beliefs. That's not the way it works. So you have a certain belief about life. And in certain circumstances or situations, you may think, wow, this is futile. I don't know what the fuck to do. And I'm scared and I'm depressed. Well, the emotion follows futility. And that makes sense to me. But here's the deal. You can have an interpretation about your life circumstances that's futile at that moment. And the next day, something happens. Could be worse, could be better, could be indifferent, but each day is going to be different because the earth is spinning no matter what is happening.
It's just going to keep going.
It's just going to keep changing. So I always tell people everything is temporary. And the question is how you adapt to these things. And I accepted, I always tell people, embrace your depression for a minute and then analyze it and say, wait a minute, what thought is creating this emotion? And when you start practicing this, all of a sudden you realize you have a lot of control over your thoughts. And you might realize that, wow, I'm creating a bunch of misery out of thin air. It's okay to be depressed, but you know what? I don't think I want to be anymore. And I think I'm ready to let go of embracing this. I think I'm ready to change the way I see this situation. And loneliness is part of that. If you feel like there are no people in the world, and many times in my life, from the age of about 7 to 30, I felt like there was nobody there for me. And in many times where it was just me alone, I was depressed, at points suicidal, hurting. But somehow I got through it. And what I realized after about 29, 30 years old, I figured out, oh, I'm okay because everything always changes. I do bump into new people. I do, even in spite of my constant adherence to fear and anxiety, and how much I believed I needed all that, I still managed to progress in my life. And you will too.
Yeah.
But it gets a lot easier when you say, oh, being depressed or having a belief about circumstances that is futile is normal. It's a part of being a human being. Being lonely, part of being human being. It's all just a part of the human experience. And I get to decide whether I'm going to change that today. And so you make efforts. That's what you do, but you don't have to be perfect. Social media gives the impression that everybody has this glorious life and that they're all smart and they all have these amazing slogans that they live by. Most of that's just bullshit. People are just struggling just like you.
Yeah.
That's the majority of us. Very few people are influencers on the web, okay? Statistically.
Well, and even the influencers on the web have their moments, right? Because struggle is a part of being human. And, so and all of these things, the idea of loneliness, when you're leaving a cult, it does feel like you're all alone in the world. It can feel that way. But it's completely temporary. It's completely temporary, and it will only last as long as you allow it to, because, as Mark said, the world keeps turning. A lot of people don't work now. We have met people that leave the cult, that worked within the cult, that worked at rehab, that did these things, or maybe married within the cult, and you may have to extricate yourself, and it may feel super alone. But I guarantee you, like leaving a bad marriage, you stick with it, you move forward, you build your life, you embrace your autonomy, you embrace who you are, and go do the things that you want to do with your life. And the people will show up. You just start to meet people. They just start coming and being a part of your life. And but you have to kind of get through that initial feeling of, those negative, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing. And, oh, maybe I just need to hang on a little bit longer. Or you just got to kind of break free from all that and go, no, I'm going to be free and I'm going to embrace it. and just get excited about what life has in store for me.
And it's not like when you were in the cult, you didn't feel lonely in it.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I looked around and I said, holy shit, this feels like a dingy bar. And I feel
Yeah.
like these people could give a shit less about me, and they're using me. And how many times have you been ripped off in the cult or hurt emotionally or had sexual relations with somebody you didn't want to have, or they took advantage of you? These are things that in the cult are happening constantly. And the question is, do you believe it's possible for you to have better success and better quality relationships outside of that? And I'm telling you, you can. Now you can also have terrible relationships outside of it.
Sure.
I've done that too.
Me too.
The point is, I would rather be a free thinking, free acting person making mistakes on the outside than being sucked into a cult and making those mistakes on the inside of the cult. Because on the inside, I got no hope.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I got no hope. I got no real value as a human being, because they don't see me as that. They see me as somebody that has to perform under contract, because that's what it comes down to, their contractual relationships. Last thing I want to say is, if you're at the point where all of this makes some sense, but you're terrified, then do one coaching session with me or Michelle. One. Because what I'll do is I'll go through the deprogramming seminar series with you, and I will show you why what I'm saying about the cult is true. We have a 5-seminar series. I'll have you do that before you meet with me or her, if you're a female. And at that point, we can go over how you can move out of this and move forward with your life. One session, 90 minutes. And we'll build a plan of exactly how to execute or not. Or
just get the deprogramming, 12-step deprogramming. It's on the bottom of the coaching page.
That's true.
And or if you download our app, there's actually a clip from it in the app, and you can actually order the program, the deprogramming, right through the app.
Yeah, it's like $50, dude.
Yeah.
It's we made it totally affordable for anybody that wants it. So there's a way to get out of this. So you have the facts and you're armed with that. And again, we're not mad at AA.
No.
We're just factually speaking about what we experienced and the truth about where it came from and why it's detrimental.
Yeah. And if it was helpful to you, you wouldn't have found the freedom model.
That's for sure.
So I think sometimes, it's kind of like when people talk about going back to meetings, I often think of the people I've known that got divorced, and then they would every once in a while go back with their ex and hook up and then remember, oh, I remember why I got divorced. I think that can happen. And maybe there's a process of leaving that may, maybe you just go back with an open mind. You're learning, okay, now I remember why I left.
That's right.
Now I remember why I left. All right. I hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you next week. If you can think of a topic you want us to talk about,
go onto our group.
Go into the Freedom Model group and join us and let us know what you'd like to hear on our podcast. Or if you know somebody, or you yourself might want to be a guest on our podcast, we definitely email us at info@thefreedommodel.org. And
don't forget to give us a 5-star rating.
on
Spotify or any one of the outlets for the podcast. And that helps us reach more people. That's important. We want to reach everybody that has this problem across the globe. Yeah.
And if you know somebody, look, I don't think you should bring this book into a meeting and beat people. But if somebody calls you and says, what are you doing? Turn them on to our podcast and say, why don't you listen to this podcast, and you'll understand a little bit more about what I'm doing.
That's it.
So, all right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Take care.